Good morning, everyone. We're going to have a very short video today. We just need to finish up the Vietnam War from where we left off yesterday and then get through the election of 1972 and we will be finished. So very, very short today. Yesterday we left off on this slide. We had talked about the various things that had happened that made Vietnam just a really ugly war at this point in American history, the late 60s, early 70s. And we talked about the fact that the South Vietnamese resistance collapsed um, in the spring of 1975. Yeah, spring of 75. The North Vietnamese launched this massive offensive, and just the South Vietnamese just collapsed, and the whole country is going to fall apart. So Vietnam ends up toppling the Khmer Rouge, I believe is where we were. The Khmer Rouge is a government in Cambodia, which is right next door to Vietnam. Horrible, horrible government led by Pol Pot. Yeah, Polpot. Pol Pot, that was his name. Anyway, he was a horrible person. He ordered the execution of about 20% of Cambodia's population. You think in any group of five, one of them is dead. Has been murdered. It was just horrible. So Vietnam ends up toppling that regime, which you would think, oh, well, that's good. We get rid of him. But they put in a communist government in its place, and it was just horrible. So this wave of isolationism comes into the United States where we just kind of withdraw within ourselves, and we're like, we're not messing with the rest of the world. We don't care what's going on out there. We just want to leave everybody else alone, and everybody else leave us alone. And all of this leads to the War Powers Act of 1973. And I realize that these years are a little off, but you have to kind of broaden your senses of what you're looking at here. The War Powers Act of 1973 basically was Congress taking away power from the president, or trying to. They were limiting the president's power to use American troops anywhere he wanted. Up until this point, he had that power, and now they're going to limit that, or try to limit that, so that American troops don't end up in another Vietnam setting. There's a lot of arguments out there today, and you can still find, of course, Vietnam vets everywhere. They're not that old. They're older than me, yes, but they're not that old. Could America have won this war? Should America have won this war? There's a lot of divisive opinions, and a lot of it, of course, is going to depend on what side of politics you land on. But South Vietnam was full of an unpopular and corrupt government. That's just fact. The people didn't like the government, and the government was so incredibly corrupt that some people think that the war was unwinnable because you're fighting to keep something that's not worth keeping. Other people say that, had we gone in full force right away at the beginning of the war, back in the Johnson era, we could have won it well ahead of where it was. We could have invaded North Vietnam, and that would have won it. Some people say that if the media had stayed out of the war, we could have won it. Is it worth arguing about now? We can't change what is, and it's not worth. I don't know. I guess in some situations it is worth arguing about. But the fact of the matter is fact, and time cannot be rewound. Okay. Last thing we need to talk about is the 1972 election. Nixon has gained in popularity because he's pulled troops out of Vietnam, because he went to China and established diplomatic relations with that country. So his chances of re-election are looking pretty good. So George Wallace, who had run on the previous ticket, 1968, remember he had run as a third party candidate. He's the guy from Alabama that I said wasn't worth really talking about. He's really just power-hungry racist. He runs as the Democratic candidate, and he did well in many states, but then he gets shot by a would-be assassin and he is permanently paralyzed. He will go on to serve again as a couple more terms as Alabama's governor and ruin that state some more. But in the meantime, he's pretty much out of the presidential race. So the Democrats end up choosing George McGovern. And I want you to think George McGovern is kind of like the Bernie Sanders of 1972. Okay? He is far to the left of where most American voters are. He's probably very similar to Bernie Sanders in his views, but America wasn't that far left at that point. So he has these weird ideas. He tells the American people that he would crawl to North Vietnam to make things right and end the war. That doesn't go over well with most Americans, and it shouldn't. So he has a lot of problems. He really botched the Vietnam issue. He had a running mate. His name, I'm looking in the book, is Thomas Eagleton. And the guy, it comes out in the media that he actually has undergone shock therapy treatment for some personal issues. I don't know what all was involved, and I don't really want to know. But anyway, at first George McGovern says, "Oh, I'm standing behind my guy. This is him." And then like 2 weeks later, he forces him off the ticket, and he has to find a new running mate because by this point he's already won the Democratic nomination. So now he's got to find a replacement, and he has quite a bit of difficulty because nobody likes him. He asks 5 people to be his running mate before finally somebody says they will. And oddly enough, the person who agrees to be his running mate is Sergeant Shriver. And his first name is Sergeant. It's not a military title. It's his first name. He is actually, I don't know if many of you will recognize his last name, but he's connected to the Kennedys. Okay, Sergeant Shriver was the former head of the Peace Corps, which remember that was started by John Kennedy. He was married to Eunice Kennedy, the sister of President Kennedy, and founder of the Special Olympics. He was also the father of Marie Shriver, the ex-wife of Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, of course, was an actor, and the former governor of California. So it's all interconnected there. But anyway, Nixon crushes him. He's not a good person. Not Shriver, but McGovern isn't. He's incredibly unpopular. And Nixon wins in this massive landslide, but it doesn't really matter because he won 49 states. But 2 years later, he's going to be resigning from office, and we'll get to that in the next chapter. All right, that concludes chapter 24. Chapter 25 is next. Okay, so we're nearing the end. I need to have an opinion from you about what you think of skipping chapter 24 test and just putting it on the final exam. I'm going to put a question on your quiz today about that. Let me know what you think. I want an honest opinion. And remember to be double checking your grades. Make sure you've got everything turned in, because as we get closer to those deadlines of exams, we need to make sure we can get it all done. Okay. If you need to talk to me, let me know. Send me an email, and I'm here all the time. So I'll talk to you later.